Hello and welcome to the video. This tale is titled, The City of the Druids. This is the second part of a 6-part series, so if you have missed the first one, consider going back and watching Archer in the Forbidden Forest. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and any feedback you have, and consider subscribing as there will be more tales to come. The company of men rode their horses slowly and carefully through the thick vegetation. With every twist and turn, they attempted to follow their captain as closely as possible. The path the 20 men were taking was only known to the captain and was barely discernible to the unfamiliar eye. It was sometimes wide enough for 2 horses abreast, but most of the trail was single file. The men followed with grave care the directions given from the head of the column, where the captain and the royal emissary rode, lest they get lost. Fortunately, the terrain they traversed was flat, aside from the thick roots running this way and that across the ground, which the horses managed with little effort. The assembly of mounted men all wore the same garb: blue undertunics, mail shirts that came down to their knees, and breastplates emblazoned with the blue lily that marked them as soldiers from the kingdom of Arundel. They each carried a long spear, a teardrop-shaped shield, which also bore the Arundel lily, and a short sword strapped to the hip. The captain stood out, with a gold chain around his neck and an intricate pattern on his breastplate, signalling his station. Only the emissary wore non-military garments, fine linens in shades of blue that wrapped around his body like water. The forest around them consisted of dense, innumerable trees, if they could be called that. Only one type of tree seemed to grow here. They were unlike any plant found elsewhere in the kingdom and appeared almost transparent as sun shone through the vibrant green boughs. The trunks had the diameter of a grown man's palm, but they reached upwards of 10 meters in height. Each tree sprouted 4, sometimes 5 branches that protruded upwards and ended in massive leaves, each one the size of a wagon. Between the thick roots of the strange trees, large fern-like bushes grew in an uneven carpet. The men were taking in the forest's oddities when the emissary raised his voice and asked the captain a question. He made sure to talk loud enough that all the men could hear him.
I don't understand why we are bothering to bring terms to these tree lovers in the first place. Surely we just burn them out, and what remains we put to the sword.
After a few chuckles and murmurs of assent from the men, the captain replied,
Listen here, Lord Simon. I know you have never been into this forest, but I have, and I can tell you that what you suggest would be impossible. Even if you had 100,000 men, you couldn't accomplish this. You see these slim trees all around us, yes?
Pausing to remove his leather glove and tuck it into his belt, the captain stretched out his hand and brushed it across one of the closest tree trunks.
These trees and their roots are filled with a sticky, noxious liquid. They cannot be set alight, and if you try to cut one down, the sap will run all over your body and hold you fast to the spot. I've seen a man take over a week to get free of its sticky embrace, and he had help. Even if you were to get an army through this wood, you would never get past the wall of vines and brambles that surround the city.
The emissary chuckled.
Sap, brambles and vines don't scare me, Captain. Well, they scare me, the captain replied. The wall is 5 meters high and 3 deep. You cannot cut your way through, the vines are so hearty. So you may say, can't we just go over it?
The captain gave the emissary a questioning look, but before the man could open his mouth, the captain cut him off.
5 meters is not so tall after all. Once on top of the natural wall, it would be incredibly hard to bridge over it. If you fell into the dark tangle of vines, you wouldn't be getting out again. Slowly, you would be digested by the carnivorous plants that live within the wall itself.
Pausing, the captain looked back at the men. Worry and trepidation had come over their faces. Turning to the emissary, the captain continued his lecture.
Let's say you make it over that wall and into their city. The trees that grow there are as wide around as an entire house and can grow higher than any castle walls I've ever seen.
Seeing the look of disbelief on the emissary's face, The captain picked up his pace.
As a matter of fact, the trees are used as houses by these druids. The entrances are hidden in the massive root networks that protrude from the base of these trees. On the trunk of each tree, there are what look like large knots in the wood. The druids use them to hide small windows, from which an archer might send an arrow your way. Before you had time to determine where it had come from, the archer would be safely hidden away in their tree, while you would be injured or perhaps dead. No, my dear emissary, not with 200,000 men could you accomplish such a feat. This is why we are on our way to deliver the king's terms.
Having been talked down, the emissary looked back at the rest of the men, who were not succeeding in hiding their concern as they looked around the forest with frantic eyes. It was not long before the captain spoke again.
If my memory serves me correctly, yes, we are nearly at the forest wall now.
The wall was just as the captain had described it. It was so dense that you couldn't see through to the other side, and it stretched out into the forest to the left and right.
Now, so we don't end our lives prematurely,
murmured the captain, just loud enough for the emissary to hear. He raised an arm in command for the rest of the column.
Everyone hold back.
Turning to the wall, he announced,
We are messengers from the kingdom of Arundel, and have important tidings for which your matriarch will wish to hear. This is Lord Simon and his guard. My name is Captain Drustin. Please relay this to your leader, as my name is known to her.
Turning back to the emissary with a smile, the captain dismounted and indicated to the rest of the men to do the same.
The horses will be fine here. All we need do is wait.
After roughly 15 minutes had passed, one of the men noticed an opening to the right of the party, a little way down the wall. There stood a druid, who beckoned the group to follow him. A gap barely wide enough for a man to pass through had appeared in the dense wall. Only after seeing the captain fearlessly pass through the wall did the rest of the men pluck up the courage to follow. Once on the other side, the emissary turned and watched as vines grew to cover the space where the gap in the wall had been. It was as if it had never been there at all. Beyond the wall were more trees, larger than those on the outside had been. The emissary picked up his stride to regroup with the others. The men were clearly unsettled at the disappearance of their only exit, gripping their spears and shields nervously. Lord Simon passed them, catching up with Captain Drustin and the druid, who walked several paces ahead of them. The emissary leaned toward the captain and asked under his breath,
You said your name was known to their leader. How is that possible? Well, you see, I once found myself lost in these woods as a small child, and these druids saved me.
He huffed out a bitter laugh.
Gods know why the savages did it. A few weeks after my disappearance, I walked out of the forest and straight to my home without a scratch on me. Ever since then, King Ventus has used my knowledge of the forest and these people.
The captain winced as he spoke the word.
To gain as much knowledge as possible, and so one day we may be able to properly rid the world of them.
Finally, they came to the part of the forest where grew the massive trees the captain had described. Once again, his description had been accurate.
Wait here, commanded the druid,
as he left them in front of the largest tree of all. It was twice the diameter of the others, and the root network was so vast and confusing, it seemed impossible to approach the trunk. Its canopy stretched up and above the surrounding trees and out of sight. The company didn't have long to admire the tree before a druidess emerged from somewhere within the tangle of roots at the base of the tree. She was of average height and slim build, with waist-long light brown hair and a circlet of silver atop her head. She wore an ochre-coloured laced shirt that had dark green embroidered vines running down each sleeve. A leather belt holding many small pouches hung over her light brown pants and leather boots, which were laced tightly to her knees and cuffed outward. Her pale complexion and piercing, bright blue eyes looked upon the captain and the emissary.
"Why is it that you have come?"
she intoned.
"We are here at the behest of His Royal Majesty, King Ventus II, and it would be in your best interest, witch, for you to hear what we have to say."
"Luckily, Flatfoot, I do not take petty insults seriously, or you would have already forfeited yours and your men's lives. But I do admit, I am curious to hear what your oath of a king wants this time. However, I will only hear it from you, as you are known." With a dismissive look to the others, she beckoned the captain to follow her. Before doing so, he murmured to the disgruntled emissary, "Give me the papers, and I will force her to sign them if I must. You wait here. Tell your guards to stay alert, but under no circumstances to show any signs of aggression. Otherwise, we will all be killed before we can so much as draw our swords." With that, the captain followed the Druidess into the nest of roots and vanished into the confusion. Once inside, Drustin closed the door behind him and turned around to speak. Before he could get a word out, the Druidess had him in her arms, embracing him with all her strength. Chuckling, the captain returned the gesture, lifting her above the ground.
"Oh, come now. It hasn't been that long, Nessa."
"You call 10 months not that long? That is the second longest you have been without coming to see us, or me, since we were children." As she spoke, the Druidess drew back from the man and began to walk around the room. The captain responded,
"Yes, well, with this border war with the Kingdom of Moor's End, it wouldn't be a very good look if the king's most trusted captain suddenly disappeared while on campaign. I told you from the earliest that if this friendship of ours was to last, I had to play my part."
Nessa paused her pacing to reply in a sarcastic tone.
"Oh, and how wonderfully you have done that. One of my men saw a large group of your blue-bellied soldiers traipsing about within a few kilometers of our walls not too long ago. Your idiot king has grown very bold of late."
The captain sighed and shook his head.
"That does not surprise me. In fact, it is what I have come here to discuss with you. You see, he has all but assured victory over Moor's End, and will, in the near future, control all the land from the Medway River in the north, all the way to the eastern Tama River, meaning your magical forest will be within his kingdom."
Nessa sneered.
"His kingdom? What a naive way of looking at the world. I guess the common folk didn't get a say in this ridiculous war. And over what? More land? Our tribe would never jeopardize the safety of its people for such a tyrant." "Be that as it may, I know it is hard for you to understand our ways. If you can say one thing about the king, he is good at winning battles."
Starting to pace again, Nessa looked at the ceiling as she went on.
"Psh, let's see him up against our foil warriors. He may outnumber us, but we have the finest archers in the world. Maybe in here, in your wood, you could win. But out on an open field of battle, I'm afraid to say he would most likely take that victory."
Nessa rolled her eyes, and the captain changed the subject.
"Look, regardless of these hypotheticals, he has sent me here with his terms. The original document he put to me was not worth delivering. It involved the payment of monthly taxes in gold."
Ignoring Nessa's harsh chuckle, he continued.
"I told him, yet again, that your people do not value that sort of thing. I convinced him to turn his mind to something you do have, food. His army is always in need of it, and his lands are not enough to sustain his people."
Nessa's face was stone.
"Never. I would rather die than disrupt our well-maintained balance with the forest." "Listen, this is the best option. Frankly, it is the only option. And it is not like it would consume the entire forest supply of wildlife." "That's not the point. From my knowledge, it would simply mean doubling the amount your hunters bring down every month. That doesn't sound like such a burden in exchange for ongoing peace, now does it?"
He crossed the room to get closer to the Druidess and looked right into her cold eyes. She opened her mouth uncertainly, then closed it again.
"You know that we only ever take from the forest what we absolutely need. We leave the rest untouched." "I understand, really I do. However, what other option do we have? If you lash out with an army from your forest, then you will be destroyed, and if he ventures in with his, he will be." "The fool could try." Now it was the captain's turn to be serious. Do you know what happens if King Ventus is out of the way? Someone will replace him that will not listen to my counsel. Then it will be an endless war between forest and plain. You don't want that, do you?
No, what a waste of lives that would be.
Exactly. Softening her voice, Nessa replied.
I don't like it, Drustin, but I know you have our best interests at heart. You always have. I honestly don't know what I would ever do without you. Someday I will persuade you to give up your foolish ways and come live here with us, where you belong.
Lovely idea, but then who would keep the wolves at bay for you? Until there is far more certainty in this part of the world, that is not possible, I'm afraid. If there was an alliance between you two, then maybe.
We both know that that would never happen.
Someday.
They both looked into each other's faces for a few heartbeats longer, then broke apart. The captain ended the silence with an unsubtle clearing of his throat.
Yeah, if you would put your mark on these documents, we can have this business behind us. I promise to return before long, alone this time.
Very well, Captain. I agree to these terms, I suppose. And you'd better. The two shared a weak smile as Nessa put her mark to the parchment. She looked up into his face, and her smile turned serious as she threw her arms around him once more.
You'd better.
With those words, she buried her face into his chest. They stood there for but a moment before they were interrupted by a loud commotion coming from outside. They broke apart, worry on each of their faces. The disorder turned into screams as they both made for the door. Before they reached it, however, the king's emissary came through the door with a long knife in hand. The captain stiffened.
What have you done? Answer me immediately.
Only what the king asked of me. You see, he knew he could never take this place by force, so he asked me to accompany you. I have a brilliant memory and will find my way back easily enough, my guards making a fine distraction. Finally, I shall cut the head off this green snake once and for all.
Before Nessa could react, the captain drew his dagger, knowing that the sword at his belt would have taken too long. Plunging forward, he met the would-be assassin and the two men exchanged a flurry of blows. Nessa tried to cry out, but before she could, the emissary fell back, blood gushing from his neck and armpit. His eyes were wide with fear, and he clutched at his neck as he slid down the wall. The captain was still for a moment, as if shocked at what he had done.
Are you all right, Drustin?
Nessa asked hesitantly. He turned around, tears in his eyes. He stretched out his ungloved hand to her as he fell to his knees.
No, Drustin!
She gasped, running to catch him as he fell. In his armor, he was too heavy for her, and they both fell to the ground. It took all her might to roll him over so she could search for the wound. His bare hand had a large gash across the palm.
Shh, don't worry, my dear. I'll have this mended in no time.
As she held his bleeding hand, she closed her eyes and focused. Her hands started to glow a sparkling yellow, and the cut began to close on its own accord. The glow seemed to stitch his wound back together as the blood slowly stopped pouring out. Drustin choked, coughing up foam as tears ran down his face.
I've loved you from the...
He trailed off as his eyes grew unfocused and then finally went still.
I don't understand. It was just a small cut. I've seen you come back from so much worse. Oh, Drustin.
She began to heave with tears as she rocked his limp body in her arms. Hearing another scream from outside, she looked up at the door, then to the dead assassin, tears still running down her cheeks. The emissary's dagger lay on the floor beside him. The blade dripped with blood and something else, a liquid that shone with a dark purple tint. Her expression of sorrow turned to that of red-hot vengeance.
An assassin with a poisoned blade? Oh, you have sealed your fate, King of Kings. I curse you and your filthy soul. I myself will be the one to see the last breath leave your body.
Taking one last look at the lifeless captain, she barreled through the open door and out into the sunlight. The king's men were standing in a circle with their shields raised, shouting to one another.
A few closest to the base of the tree lay dead upon the ground, their bodies pierced with arrows. With a booming voice, Nessa shouted, "I am Nessa, leader of the foil Druids. Hear me and know your end is nigh. You will be the first sacrifices sent to your deaths, but do not despair. Your families and loved ones will be joining you shortly." With her terrible voice echoing in the men's ears, they broke and started to run in the direction they had come from. "There is no escape. The forest will devour you all." With these words, she stretched out her arms, and giant vines shot out of the ground at her feet. The vines moved faster than any arrow and tangled themselves around the fleeing men. Once each vine had gained a firm purchase on the bodies and limbs of the soldiers, they slowly raised them into the air. The druidess turned her hands over and balled them into fists energetically. The vines tightened suddenly, tearing the men apart, all but one. Blood and entrails splashed to the ground in a torrent. The one remaining man screamed at the top of his lungs as the vines pulled him closer to the leader of the Druids. "Quit your screams. You are the lucky one here today. You will run back to your king and tell him this in person. His foolishness today will cost him his life and those of everyone in his precious city of stone. The will of the forest cannot be stopped." With that, the vines dropped the man and he fell hard to the forest floor. His eyes darted around the clearing in utter terror. As he recovered himself, he broke into a hobbled run back toward the wall. The end. This was a Tello Tale. Thanks for watching.